History books all agree that on the 14th of April 1864 at Ford's Theatre, John Wilkes Booth fired a fatal single gunshot into the back of Abraham Lincoln's head. But the elementary facts surrounding Honest Abe's assassination failed to uncover a deeper conspiracy, a hidden hand of a very powerful organisation. I feel more and more every day that it is not against the Americans of the South alone I am fighting. It is more against the Pope of Rome, his Jesuits and their slaves. Abraham Lincoln. The Jesuits, who are the counter-reformists, arm of the Vatican, who have been banned by many of the European nations, leaving behind them bloodbaths, assassinations and revolutions. The American Civil War was well underway when Abraham Lincoln was murdered by the Vatican assassin John Wilkes Booth, aided and abetted by other fundamentalist Catholics. The Jesuit oath is chilling and the modus operandi deplorable. You have been taught to insidiously plant the seeds of jealousy and hatred between states that were at peace, and incite them to deeds of blood involving them in war with each other, and to create revolutions and civil wars in communities, provinces and countries that were independent and prosperous, and enjoying the blessings of peace. The papacy coveted and craved the power and wealth of the newly born land of the free, and had every reason to assassinate Abraham Lincoln. Rome wanted their very own piece of America through papal proxies under the blessing of Pope Pius IX and influence of the Jesuit order. The Constitution of the United States guarantees liberty of conscience. Nothing is dearer or more fundamental. Pope Pius IX, in his encyclical letter of August 15, 1854, said, "The absurd and erroneous doctrines or ravings in defence of liberty of conscience are a most pestilential error, a pest of all others most to be dreaded in a state." The same Pope, in his encyclical letter of December 8, 1864, anathematized those who assert the liberty of conscience and of religious worship. Also, all such as maintain that the Church may not employ force. Let us see what Abraham Lincoln had to say about the resentment the Vatican had for America. The true motive power of the Civil War is secreted behind the thick walls of the Vatican, the colleges and schools of the Jesuits. They have continued in a silent but most efficacious way to spread their hatred against our institutions, our laws and our liberties in such a way that this terrible conflict became unavoidable between the North and the South. It is popery that we owe this terrible civil war. I would have laughed at the man who would have told me that before I became president, but Professor Morse has opened my eyes on that subject. Our people are yet ready to learn and believe those things. And perhaps it is not the proper time to initiate them into the dark mysteries of hell. Sooner or later the nation will know, and then those who have caused those desolations and disasters will be called to give an account. Abraham Lincoln. If the American people could learn what I know of the fierce hatred of the priests of Rome against our institutions, our schools, our most sacred rights, and our so dearly bought liberties, they would drive them out as traitors. Abraham Lincoln. Whenever an important work needs to be done, Rome calls the Jesuits and their agents. President Lincoln had stood in the way of Rome's plans, and in the eyes of Rome, Lincoln was a heretical and rebellious ruler, having directed his generals to seize and occupy the Catholic state of Baltimore, Maryland, during the American Civil War. It is an article of faith that the Pope has the right to depose heretical and rebellious kings. Moral theology of Sir Iris, the father of Jesuit moral theology. Most historians agree that it was the decision by Chief Justice Roger B. Taney that was the pretext for the Southern Confederacy's igniting of the Great American Civil War. And today, with a hindsight of history, we must now regard that war as a Catholic war on American soil. Father Chiniquet cites the following conversation with Lincoln to support his claim of the Jesuits' plot against the life of the President. "My dear President, I must repeat to you here what I said when at Urbana in 1856. My fear is that you will fall under the blows of a Jesuit assassin, if you do not pay more attention than you have done till now to protect yourself." President Lincoln replied, "You are not the first to warn me against the dangers of assassination. My ambassadors in Italy, France and England, as well as Professor Morse, have many times warned me against the plots of the murderers, which they have detected in those different countries. But I see no other safeguard against those murderers but to be always ready to die, as Christ advises it. The assassin John Wilkes Booth was a well-known actor and Confederate spy from Maryland, Baltimore, and is said to have contacts with the Confederate Secret Service. It's been told to us, coming from what we believe to be true authority, that Booth, about 3 weeks before he committed the crime, was admitted to the Roman Catholic Church and privately received the sacraments from no less a personage than Archbishop Spalding himself, which he did to silence any conscientious scruples that he might have in taking Abraham Lincoln's life. And it was but a short time after that Archbishop Spalding received a donation of funds for the specific purpose which was to uniform and equip a military body in the same manner and style as the Papal Guard at Rome. The uniforms, muskets, cartridge boxes and belts, all bearing the papal coat of arms and consecrated by the Pope himself, were sent to Archbishop Spalding at Baltimore. The entire diocese was rebel to the core and fierce in its hatred of Lincoln. Edward A. Sherman, in Engineer Corps of Hell, page 213. Abraham Lincoln was their nemesis. They knew only too well that he would be the stumbling block to their future plans. They feared with a deadly fear the influence of his able pen and voice. They knew that to permit this calm, thorough, clear-visioned man, who had such a complete estimate of their perfidious designs, to serve at the helm of the Reconstruction period would be their ultimate rout in our political affairs. Bruce McCarty, an ex-Roman Catholic. The fundamentalist Catholics accused and charged for involvement in the murder of Abraham Lincoln, John Wilkes Booth, John H. Surratt upon the instigation of Jefferson Davis, Jacob Thompson, Clement C. Clay, George N. Sanders, and others, with intent thereby to aid the existing rebellion and subvert the Constitution and laws of the United States. In speaking of this assassination of the President and others, Jacob Thompson said that it was only removing them from office, that the killing of a tyrant was no murder, a Jesuit doctrine. One of the central figures of interest in the assassination trial was Mrs. Airy E. Surratt. Mrs. Surratt and her family were devout Catholics and regularly attended church services. Both she and her son, John H. Surratt, were indicted for involvement in Lincoln's murder. Brigadier General Thomas M. Harris, a member of the Hunter Commission, the commission that investigated Lincoln's murder, wrote a book in which he said, "It is a fact well established that the headquarters of the conspiracy was the house of a Roman Catholic family, of which Mrs. Mary E. Surratt was the head, and that all of its inmates, including a number of boarders, were devoted members of the Roman Catholic Church. This house was the meeting place, the council chamber, of Booth, John Wilkes, and his conspirators, including John H. Surratt, whose mentor was a Jesuit, Father B. F. Widget, the wily Jesuit, in the hope of destroying our government and establishing a confederacy, the Southern Rebellion, was able to convert him, John Surratt, to Catholicism." Brigadier General Thomas M. Harris. The newspaper of the town of St. Cloud, Minnesota, Monday, April 17, 1865, will furnish us with further proof of the involvement of the Jesuits in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln at the hands of Booth. Positive evidence that these Jesuit fathers, priests of Rome, engaged in correspondence with their brethren in Washington City and had informed them of the plan to assassinate the President. The agent for its accomplishment had been found, the time for its execution had been set, and the Jesuits were so sure of its accomplishment that they could announce it, the assassination itself, before it had happened. They could not refrain from passing it around as a piece of glorious news. Not long after Lincoln's assassination, the US government broke off diplomatic relations with the Vatican on the 30th of June 1867, purportedly because Rome did not allow non-Catholic religious worship within the walls of Rome. The real reason is more likely to be that because the Vatican was behind the assassination of Lincoln, and that every conspirator was not only Roman Catholic, but coached by the Jesuits. At the time, the truth was suppressed about the motive and religious zeal of those convicted, found guilty, and hanged, because of the possible backlash of the American citizens. I pity the priests, the bishops, and the monks of Rome in the United States when these people realize that they are in great part responsible for the tears and bloodshed in this war. I conceal what I know, for if the people knew the whole truth, this war would turn into a religious war, and at once take a tenfold more savage, bloody character. It would become merciless, as all religious wars are. It would become a war of extermination on both sides. The Protestants of both the North and the South would surely exterminate the priests and the Jesuits. If they could hear what Professor Morse has said to me of the plots made in the very city of Rome to destroy this republic. Abraham Lincoln,